Welcome to the P.A.S. Report Weekly Roundup Podcast. The P.A.S. Report provides an honest analysis on the critical issues that matter to you without the biased media filters. Here's your host, Professor Nicholas Giordano.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the P.A.S. Report Podcast. This is your host, Nick Giordano, and this administration never ceases to amaze me. The president comes out, speaks last Thursday, talking about the objects in the sky. He doesn't say anything new. The only thing he does say is that the objects they shot down posed no threat to the United States, no threat to our national security. The objects weren't linked to China. I mean, that was obvious. If they were linked to China, you would have just stated that from the beginning. He said the objects are most likely tied to private companies, recreation, research institutions. Insane. Now there's reports that the objects, one of the objects shot down was from a hobby group. It's all BS, and it's clear they have no clue where these objects are coming from, what the intent is, not for nothing. But are we really going to believe that we flew multi-million-dollar aircraft using missiles that cost about $400,000 to take out a hobby group's balloon? I don't believe that for a second. But if it does turn out to actually be true, it wouldn't shock me in a sense. I think it would accurately reflect the entire Biden presidency, a presidency of sheer and utter incompetence. However, what's more important are the events that President Biden wasn't asked about. President Biden never mentioned the chemical disaster in Ohio, and the press didn't ask him about it. A disaster of epic proportions, one that's destroying the lives and livelihoods of Americans. The lack of information, it's stunning. I mean, I've been in emergency management. Public information is extraordinarily important. You don't want people to lose trust in the information they're receiving and the response efforts. The people deserve answers. They have concerns. Where is FEMA? Where's the EPA? Where's the Department of Transportation? They should be holding 2 press conferences a day to address the concerns of the residents in these areas. The fact that they haven't done that is remarkable. They simply release statements, oh, it's safe to return, safe to return. It's completely unacceptable. Remember when they said to 9/11 responders that the air quality at the World Trade Center site was safe? How many died of cancer since then? How many died of other 9/11 related illnesses since then? 5,000? What about all those currently battling 9/11 cancers and other illnesses? How many thousands is that? Mark my words, in 15 years, the Camp Lejeune commercials are all going to be replaced by Norfolk Southern Rail commercials. It's so predictable. You see it coming. Another thing that was never mentioned by the president was the Nord Stream pipeline sabotage. I did an episode last week on this, and you would think the press would have some interest in Cy Hirsch's article. You would think they would ask whether the United States was behind the Nord Stream attack and if Biden gave the green light. Now, maybe they don't agree with Cy Hirsch's article, but if there's relevant information there, you still ask the questions. This is an explosive story, no pun intended, but the press has no interest in it, which shows they are political activists, not journalists. Wouldn't they want to seek the truth? Find out what the real answer is? This is journalism malpractice. Instead, they want to focus on the shiny objects in the sky, and it just sums up the abysmal state that we're in, that the press is in, that the entire country's in. In any event, I'm bringing on Rich Valdes. Rich is the host of America at Night with Rich Valdes. We're going to talk about the administration and the current state of America. We're going to take a look at where we are, where we're headed. Before I bring on Rich, subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. If you find the show informative, share it with your family and friends. Don't forget to visit the PAS Report website, pasreport.com, and sign up for the newsletter. With that out of the way, I want to welcome Rich Valdes, host of America at Night, and I want to congratulate Rich on getting that spot. It is well-deserved. Rich, great to have you back on the PAS Report podcast. Tell everyone about the show.
Brother, thank you. It's an honor to be here with you, Nick. This show has been around since I was born. Honestly, Larry King was the host of it back in 1978. It was a couple of hours of interviews followed by an hour of what they called Open Phone America, which was an open forum for people all across the country to call in. And then he did that. And when he went into TV and left the radio show behind, Jim Bohannon took over, and he did that for 3 decades, maintaining the same format. So I've maintaining that same format where we're doing it live, 10 p.m. Eastern time. 2 hours of interviews and then an hour of open phone. So it's a little bit different than the commentary that I've been doing most of my radio career, where it really wasn't about guests. It was really more about me just, running my mouth. Now it's, it's an actual conversation with important people like you. And it's a lot of fun.
And are you think you'll make it as long as Larry King did, being like 120 years old with the suspenders
Brother,
on?
That is my hope. I hope and pray to make it as long as either of those guys. I mean, between the two of them, they hosted that show for 45 years with 2 hosts.
Amazing.
So,
Think about all the history they were able to cover. It really is. It's amazing.
It's amazing to me. It's amazing to me to have a job for that long. So I'm just like, man, I'm so glad they picked me, and I'm honored and thrilled to be there. It's an amazing audience. I think it's ranked number 15 in the top 20 programs in the country. It's got 6.5 million listeners live. It's I think it's the only nationally syndicated show that's live in that time slot. So it's really fun when things break late in the evening, whether it's flying saucers or, Trump announcing if he's running for president, whatever it is. If it breaks after 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night, we get to cover it as it's happening. So it's pretty cool.
Nice. And speaking of UFOs, have you looked up in the skies and seen any flying objects, whether they're from another country or from the extraterrestrials that are out there?
I went outside before and I tripped and I looked down to see I was looking up in the sky to see if I saw any unidentified flying objects, but I tripped and it was a bunch of classified documents I had just stumbled over. So
were those the Biden documents or the Pence ones
anymore?
or the Trump ones? I mean, they seem to be all over the place.
I know. Thankfully, I really don't have any.
It's crazy. Now, I don't know if you heard the NORAD commander come out, but he was asked whether or not these objects are from extraterrestrials, and he said he doesn't rule everything out. But he said it so casually, like, I'm not going to rule anything out, blah, blah, blah. And then he just moved on. And I'm just sitting there like, whoa, just back up a minute. You asked a question about extraterrestrials. We're blowing these things out of the sky. If it is the aliens, maybe we shouldn't be firing on them because obviously they got sophisticated tech that could kill us all probably.
Nick, I have a family member that's a huge tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist. And so he gives me for years, he's been telling me, just wait. They're going to finally come clean and tell us that everything that's going on is really the aliens. The deep state is the aliens. Everything is the aliens.
The reptiles, the reptilians.
Yeah, the reptilian people. Right. And look, there's a lot of things that he's been telling me for years, many of which have ended up panning out. So, I don't write everything off anymore. And I think that's probably what the NORAD guy was doing, was saying, look, I'm hedging my bets here. We don't know who's doing what or how it's happening. There's always talk about Antarctica and CERN and all these other places. I'm like, look, there's a lot of people that know more than me in this stuff. I just say, it doesn't seem plausible, but, wait and see. But yeah, I heard those remarks over the weekend. And I thought, wow, that's refreshingly honest. But today, Karine Jean-Pierre made it absolutely clear that there is no alien activity that they know of. So if she said it, it's true.
But have we proven she's not one of the lizard people? That's the real question. It really is crazy when you think about everything going on today. You wonder, has this stuff always occurred and just nobody paid attention and it wasn't the 24/7 news cycles and the constant information flow? Or is this like relatively new? I mean, when we look at a country like China, 2 weeks ago, we shoot down this spy balloon. Now, the idea of China spying on us is not a surprise. It's not something that should shock anyone out there. They have a number of intel capabilities that they use to gain surveillance within the United States, gather information and whatnot. What's weird about these three new objects is that if it was China, they would just say it's China. It's not like they would really hide that. And the fact that one of the planes did report that their sensors were going AWOL as they approached this object, it is concerning. But it's not like these things just started 2 weeks ago. I mean, we've seen this in the past when it comes to drone swarms that get reported. People just don't pay attention. Do you think it's something that's been happening regularly, or is this a new phenomenon that we have to reevaluate what's going on?
I think a lot of stuff has been happening for quite a while, and I think it's all in the approach. Something that I heard earlier from a former CIA analyst, Fred Fleitz, he mentioned something. He said, I wouldn't be surprised if Biden keeps finding more things to shoot out of the sky. And he was alluding to the fact that these things have been there all along. And now that we've discovered them, it's giving Biden the opportunity to come out like Top Gun, put on his aviators, maybe throw on a leather jacket and be like, what's China got for us? I'm going to blow another one out of the sky. Get a shotgun, Jill. I got hairy legs, and really go after this thing.
Is Corn Pop assisting him?
Corn Pop is his co-pilot. Yeah.
Okay. Just want to make sure.
He wouldn't have it any other way. And I think that's part of the issue here is, he's kind of, he's saying, all right, let's go after balloons. Screw it. I think the issue that Kirby talked about, I saw a little while ago, he said something about, we've always really focused on high altitudes and high speed, like a missile. So if a missile was coming in, we could blow it out of the sky. That's what all of our missile defense systems are designed to do. So the Chinese obviously figured out, get something that's so slow moving that it just goes across America, takes pictures. But Kirby alluded to the fact that these were near aerial training sites. Each of these balloons that they shot down were near aerial training sites where they might have posed a problem for pilots that were training, and that's why they took them down. So I think, it's a little bit of both. I think there's Biden's looking for things to shoot out of the sky so he can say, and we got another one, folks, and we'll get the job done. And then you also have, the everybody else that's saying, what, we don't want to do all that. We don't want to have these problems. So I think it's a little bit of both. And it's interesting to see how China's advancing on us, and all we're doing is reacting.
Yeah, and I think that's a big problem. I think that the government itself is usually reactive, right? It reacts to whatever media coverage is out there. And we're seeing countries like China for the last 30, 40 years, they've been proactive, right? They have a comprehensive long-term strategy of what they want to accomplish and when they want to accomplish it. Where the United States, it seems like we're flying by the seat of our pants, trying to figure out, the next 5 seconds, as opposed to looking at things long term. When it comes to American government, do you feel that to a large degree we kind of lost our way, lost our focus of where the United States is supposed to be heading?
There's no question. And look, and I'm not trying to defend Biden in any way, but I think when you're in that type of executive position, it's not just like, all right, I got to just maintain. You can't just maintain when you're running the United States. You've got to chart the future. It's the United States, right? We landed a dude on the moon. So you have to maintain that energy the entire time you're president, which I don't think Biden has. So I think he kind of shows up and says, all right, we're going to be trendsetters. We're going to have the first transsexual energy person, the nuclear guy, I forget his name right now, Brinton. We're going to have
he was the one stealing luggage, woman. Right?
Yes. Okay. Luggage gate.
The luggage thief.
Yes. So, he says these things like we're going to have a black female, a black woman as vice president. We're going to have a black woman as the next Supreme Court justice. So he's hitting his milestones. I think he sees that as I'm creating the future of America by doing all these racially, racially competent in his world decisions and actions. But when it comes to foreign policy, the guy, I think he's always been asleep at the wheel. And this is a big problem. So now I think they're saying, they being our enemies, they look at this and they go, oh my gosh, we scored. Look at this guy. This guy's asleep at the wheel. He's not stupid, but he's too busy cutting deals and having Hunter collect for him on those deals to really, really say, do I really want to have a war? When it comes to wars, two of the most anti-war guys I've ever seen, Trump and Biden, right? But Trump was smart. He made sure we had a military, peace through strength. He made sure that, he told people and he checked them when he had to check them to make sure that we maintained that peace through strength. Biden's not peace through strength. Biden is really, do what you got to do. Don't involve me. Try to keep me out of the news if you can. I got deals going on here.
Well, what concerns me about Biden is the fact that, listen, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. He's got dementia, okay? Whether it's in the early stages, advanced stages, either dementia, Alzheimer's, or just plain old senile. I don't know what it is, but certainly cognitively, he's not all there. And what concerns me is the people that surround him. So if you look at, let's say, like you just said, I don't think he wants war, but the people that surround him seem to be licking their chops at potential war and conflict, particularly in the Ukraine. So we just get this report from Seymour Hersh talking about how America was actually responsible for the Nord Stream pipeline bombing. Now, in his report, it was extraordinarily detailed, lays out when it happened, the Navy was responsible, Navy divers. He pointed to the types of explosives. Like you had to have someone give you this information. This is not stuff you can make up in your head. And the only reason I could see that America would blow up the Nord Stream pipeline is to try and suck Europe further into the Ukraine conflict, thereby drawing America into the Ukraine conflict. Does that concern you, the people that surround him?
100%. All of them concern me, Biden and the people that surround him, because again, I think you've got to be clever, right? So Trump figured out a way to satisfy the people like me, right? War hungry people. I'm one of those. I've never met a war I didn't think we should go into, because I think I believe that let's fight over there and fight over here. And I realized the power of the military industrial complex. I don't think that I could take them on and dismantle them. I guess it takes a special guy to think that way. But Trump figured out we could still build the military and not have to go to war. And that appeased everybody, right? It was like, oh, wow, look at that. They get the billions in the contracts. You put 800 billion into the military and you still don't go to war. Wow. Peace through strength. Look at that yet again. Right. So he figured that part out. I think Biden just couldn't follow suit on that and say, yeah, we'll spend the money and keep you guys in the deep state happy. Here's the money. No, he's like, no, here's the money. Let's go to war. But let's not us go to war. Let's have them go to war and we'll back them up and we'll do what we got to do. But we'll send them the money and now there's this whole convoluted web going on. Right. I talked to former National Security Advisor Victoria Coates, and she said, I hadn't done the math, but she was like, $100 billion has already gone into this war in Ukraine at that time that we had the conversation. And at the time, it was a record. We'd never spent $100 billion on anybody else's war ever before. And, here we are with inflation and all of these other problems that we have. So I think there's clearly a lot of people making money off of this military industrial complex move of having this prolonged war. And again, I'm all about supporting Ukraine because if you allow Russia to take over, that is the worst case scenario, right? I don't think we should sit here and be like, oh, we hate Ukraine. Screw you. Figure it out. That's not responsible. And again, you're not leading as being the United States. So I'm not one of these radical nationalists that think that we need to get out and save our money. No, I think we need to stay in control and make sure we do things the right way. But I think right now we're not doing it the right way.
I'm someone that believes in American power and influence. And I also believe that the left likes to oversimplify world events. They like to oversimplify domestic events. But when we look at something like the Russian war in Ukraine, can't we say that our objectives have been met? Right now, the United States' strategic interest, Russia is significantly weaker today than it was on February 24th, 2022. Russia is a natural adversary to the United States because it seeks power and influence around the world. We want to keep our power and influence around the world. So Russia's military capabilities have been degraded. We've overestimated the Russian military strength for decades. That was apparent. At the same time, we've given Ukraine, I think last report I saw, I don't know how accurate the number, I had it marked down at 150 billion. I just saw an article, it was 195 billion that we've given them so far. Wow. Basically, that gives us control over Ukraine policy, where we get to dictate to them what their policies are going to be. So do you think at this point it may be smart to have a diplomatic solution? Bring both sides to the table, end the conflict. Russia is significantly weaker. We control Ukraine's policies. To me, that's a win for us. I mean, I'm not trying to sound mean, but, as far as Ukraine goes, we all know that there's corruption. We all know who's going to be paying the bill to rebuild Ukraine. So why can't we control their policies? Russia's weaker and end the war, and that actually increases our power internationally.
Well, I think you're right. For me, it's gone on too long. Like, this didn't have to even get to where I think we could have done it $150 billion ago or $195 billion ago. I think from the beginning, right? And people kept saying this wouldn't have happened with Trump. That's probably true. But moreover, had it happened under Trump, I think Trump would have been the first one. And I'm using Trump because of his example in foreign policy. I think he easily would have been like, bro, to Putin, no, just like hard no. We're going to have a problem here. Don't start none. There won't be none. And you needed to take that approach early on to prevent this from happening. And if it did, you had to take strong action against them at that point. Now it's clear you can slaughter people, you can take entire cities, you can blow up whatever you want. The U.S. is just going to send them money. It's become apparent that this is a hustle. So it's like now, everybody's like, whoa, we're in on the gravy train. When do we pull the plug? So I love your plan that says pull the plug now at whatever, 200 billion. I say we should have pulled it then. I just don't know that there's the political will or the Spanish, you say cojones, right? The balls to actually go ahead and say, no, I don't see Biden doing that to Putin. So he's going to keep getting checked by Putin. And this is what worries me, that, that happens. And then you got China going, oh, this guy's a punk. Send more balloons, send more drones, send more whatever. And now it's a free for all. They're at us on every angle, including the culture war.
Well, hold it right there, Rich, because we're going to take a quick break. When we get back, I actually want to talk about the culture war. And I also want to talk about strategic interests. Like, what are our strategic interests? I think that's an important question that everyone should be asking. So we'll be right back after this break. As someone who worked in emergency management, I routinely sounded the alarm bells on our outdated grid system. Think back to 2003 when a tree branch hit a power line in Ohio, shutting down power to the entire eastern seaboard. Around 100 people died, and this was one of the costliest disasters in American history, with losses totaling over $60 billion. Even the White House sees it. They're saying 2/3 of the grid are at least 25 years old, and they recently announced billions of dollars to update it. But we're talking about the government here. How long do you think that's going to take, if at all? When an incident happens, you have to rely on yourself. Be prepared for yourself and your family. With the Patriot Power Generator, you get a solar generator that doesn't install into your house because it's portable. You can take it with you, even use it inside. But it's powerful enough for your phones, medical devices, and even your fridge. Right now, you can go to 4patriots.com, use code P.A.S. to get 10% off your first purchase on anything in the store, including the Patriot Power Generator. You'll also get their famous guarantee for an entire year after your order, plus free shipping on orders over $97. A portion of every sale is donated to charities who support veterans and their families. Just go to 4patriots.com, use code PAS to get 10% off. That's 4patriots.com, use code PAS to get yours today. I have no idea what what is the end game that the United States and the Biden administration wants to see for Ukraine and Russia. Like, nobody's come out to state clearly, here's our objectives and here's what we want to see. And obviously the withdrawal of Afghanistan played an enormous role in everything going on. And then internally in the United States, you essentially have this administration and the Democrat Party as a whole that has gone full on pitting American against American, trying to put everyone in their little groups that you just alluded to. So we have the international instability and we're degrading the cohesiveness of the United States. How dangerous do you see that?
So this is an interesting thing. I don't really believe we're going to have all out civil wars in the streets. I know a lot of people like to think that. I just don't.
Hold on. I just have to stop you because I say the same thing. Like, I just want everyone to be clear. Look at the current generation that exists. Mm-hmm. Do you really think that the current generation with man buns and skinny jeans is going to be able to be in foxholes fighting a war against neighbors? I don't think so. You cut off their electricity, you cut off access to social media, and in 15 minutes, they'll be in a fetal position.
Yeah, listen, I agree. It's one thing to get dressed up in black, what do they call that?
Antifa riot gear?
They do it, Antifa, and start throwing napalm bombs. And it's another thing, I think, to be in a real war. So I think it's the end game of the Soviets, right? What the communists have always wanted. That's how they destroyed everything, was to that ideological subversion where you just get people to fall apart from within. Don't believe in your country, don't believe in your government, don't believe in this, don't believe in that. And they play every side, right? So when you have conservatives going off the rails, we can't trust anything. Putin's good. He's the good guy. I think this people buy into that, and they're like, oh, Putin's the good guy here, and the Americans are the bad guys here. And while there may be some truth in the Americans being the bad guys, it doesn't mean America, by and large, is the bad guy. And I think once you bought into that idea, then you might as well take up residence on the left and hate the America just like they do, right? So I think Putin definitely, and it's really him, and I'm sure his people, those that are experts in propaganda and disinformation, they do their best to make sure they skin the cat on both sides to make sure we get to a place where everybody hates each other, we're at each other's throats, we no longer are what we are. I'm no longer a man. You can't be a man. You can't identify as this. She can't be a woman. And we're at this place where it's just utter confusion. And it's evident, right? It's utter confusion. You've got boys going, I don't know, maybe I want to be a girl. Girls going, I don't know, maybe I'm a boy. And then later they're detransitioning. Some stuff that I just saw coming out of the Wyoming legislature from Friday, where they had to pass a law to stop people from transitioning people younger than 18 years old. And the one woman that was testifying, I forget her name right now, but she was saying, when I was 16, I went there and they pressured my parents into saying, would you rather a living son or a dead daughter? And the parents were like, sure, where do we sign? That's great. That's like mob tactics, from a doctor who's in cahoots with these people. So, I think until you learn about and understand that is how the communists operate, and that whole divide and conquer, and understand the art of war, you don't realize, if you're just a left-wing activist or even a right-wing activist, you don't realize that you're playing right into their hand. When people say things like, well, Putin's standing up for the West and he's standing up for Christianity. They're the only Christian nation in that part of the world. And I'm like, bro, I think you're sipping too much of the Kool-Aid. Putin's not standing up for
Putin's for Russia. He's going to,
Putin's for Putin.
Yeah. All these arguments, the reality is that every nation operates in their own self-interest, and they may miscalculate as Putin did in Ukraine, but the reality is it's about self-interest. It's not about, I don't want to do what's in the best interest of any country. I want to do what's in the best interest for the United States and the people of the United
100%.
States. I'd love to return back to limited government. Do you think there's going to come a point where people wake up to this nonsense and we start getting back to some semblance of normalcy? Because I really feel weird saying it, but I miss the Democrats of the 1990s. I really do. I miss the Dick Gephardts. I miss the Tom Dashiells.
Get me Bill Clinton.
I miss them. Even down to Bill Clinton. I mean, I was talking to someone with President Clinton the other day.
Bill Clinton beats the crap out of Joe Biden right about now.
You listen to Newt Gingrich and Bill Clinton, and they were actually friends. People don't know this, but they were actually had a good relationship where they would meet at the White House. And this is when Newt Gingrich was impeaching President Clinton. And Clinton would joke about being impeached in the White House. That's the type of relationship. But they got stuff done. Do you think we're going to return to that anytime soon?
I don't know. I do believe you could get there. But again, I'm a real pie in the sky kind of thinker. I think all it takes is the right leader to say, hey, look, and, have the right people running with them. I think we've seen that, in this most recent election of McCarthy, that there's a political will to do what's right, amongst many in Congress, in particular on the Republican side. So I think, there's a willingness there, but there's also a willingness to fight. And I think you need both of those spirits. You need to fight when you have to fight. And there's times where you gotta govern and you've got to come together and coalesce. And, we have a culture, being a conservative isn't always easy, right? So, I mean, there was the Tea Party. The Tea Party was, banging the drum. We're coming in here for individualism. We're smaller government, and everything I stand for. And they started to make some waves, and then they were shut down in many ways by McConnell and others who really slowed them down, the left, the media, Lois Lerner, you name it. They threw everything they could, right? So they're there. And now, I think the resurgence of that Tea Party is the MAGA movement. And they're like, yeah, we want to make America great again. We want to live in this place where we don't care about politics, where we can have a good football game on a Sunday without having to kneel and this and that. And where it doesn't matter if you said, my black friend, and you could say things like that. Like, yeah, the white guy, the Puerto Rican guy, and go back to that way that I'm sure we grew up in. And then there's others that are just sold on the idea that, no, you guys grew up the wrong way. And what you did was wrong. We've got to fix that. We got a lot of fixing to do. And they're fixing it through future generations and classrooms, kindergarten and whatever, and telling little kids that, they can be whatever gender they want to be when they grow up. So, I mean, there's a lot of fixing, but I do believe we get back there because ultimately it's indefensible. And you got to be a very special person to start defending these things. You've got to be a very special person when, everybody that fought for, let's say, when it was not legal for a man and a man who were, first of all, it wasn't legal for them to get married. Then it became legal, right? Then they were able to get married, and then they were able to adopt kids, and that wasn't legal for a while. And then we had that case that came out a few weeks ago. And I'm not saying every gay couple that adopts a child is going to pimp them out and abuse them like that one story that broke a few weeks ago, but it does happen. And I think when people see that appeals to their sensibilities. If there's any humanity in that person, for them to say, we've got to take a look at what we're doing here. Right. And that those people were bad. I'm not saying everybody's bad, but we have to look at things and say, there's a problem here. When you go on that app and you start telling people, hey, I'm going to be raping my own kid at a certain time. This is a huge problem. So I think, you start to draw the line here and connect the dots and go, who's defending that? Who's defending this? If it feels good, do it crowd. And you find a small group of people.
But
and the ones that are around them are like, yeah. And I think a lot of people go, I can't get down with that. I like Bernie Sanders, but I can't get down with that. I like, AOC, but I can't get down with that. So I think we're seeing more of that where people are saying, this is crazy. This is that, I just talked to a friend of mine who works for a dental group, and they were saying these guys have always been Democrats their entire life. And they're saying now they're doing straight ticket Republican voting because they're trying to counter the culture, because they're saying the Democrats have sold out. They're wishy-washy on issues where they were never wishy-washy. And it wasn't a Democrat-Republican thing 15 years ago to be against this incredible wokeism that's coming in, that's dividing and hurting our country and our future. So I think when you have people that have been historically Democrat and were very liberal, and they're saying these people are out of control, the radical left, I think it's only going to put the radical left in more of a position to kind of isolate themselves and lose power. And I think we've seen that with, we're seeing it right now on climate change. I think most people I meet, people who can't stand me, never liked my politics, always made fun of my work, tell me things like, can you believe Biden? And I go, okay, can I believe Biden?
A plastic
I've never
straw.
believed Biden.
I want a plastic straw, damn it. when you say
exactly.
Like that. I mean, I think to any sensible, normal person, so forget Democrat or Republican, like any sensible, normal person would say, yeah, you know what? I don't want gender ideology being taught to a child in kindergarten. It just shouldn't happen. And
right.
it just amazes me that there's so many issues today that we're debating, but we're really wasting our time with because it shouldn't even be an issue in the first place. And what we should be we should be debating the national debt, ways to bring down and get our fiscal house in order, ways to actually improve the education system. All the things that we should be focusing on, we're not, because we're distracted with the BS because the left drives the narrative. Do you see Republicans and conservatives taking back that narrative?
It's a good question. I don't know if I can answer yes or no on it, because I do know that I hope to God that we do. I'm going to be more inclined to say yes than no, but it really does depend, right? I mean, I think we have too few people that understand how to play the game. And it's an important game to be played, right? You've got to play it in the media. You've got to play it in the government. Too many people have bought onto the idea that you can't talk about religion. You can't talk about politics. You can't, just people are afraid to do that. When people are afraid to talk about politics and religion, they're very much hamstrung. If you get into some drama in your life, what are you going to do? Not pray? You should be praying, right? You should be praying corporately with lots of people and asking for lots of prayer. And the other thing is politics. If you're not involved in your politics, and guess what happens? First thing that's going to happen is your school budget's going to get bloated, and nobody's going to care because they know you're not going to show up and complain because, we don't talk about politics. We don't ever talk about politics, right? So that's how it starts. That's what Tip O'Neill always said, all politics is local. It's true. So that this conditioning that we've done to people to say, don't talk about politics, don't talk about religion, just be neutered, don't be a man, that's toxic masculinity. I mean, there's just been a barrage of things to disassemble how an effective person could operate in society. So that's where we are. And I think it's our job to now we got to fight the culture war. We've got to fight the media war, and we've got to fight the political war. And we've got to fight these wars on many fronts with very few troops, because there's a lot of able-bodied people willing to fight, but they're just in it for the fight.
But you need to do it with toxic masculinity.
Yes.
That's going to be an important
with a healthy dose of machismo.
Exactly.
But I think once we get to that, then yes, we land in a place where we can start taking it back. And it's so encouraging to see, I'll be 45 in a couple of months, people 20 years younger than me out there really making a difference, really, getting people into this where they're like, screw those betas. It's great. It's great to hear this conversation because that's the only way we win.
I agree. And I always enjoy our conversations. Rich, where can people hear you?
Oh, well, we're on hundreds of stations across the country. Literally, I hate to say,
I want you to break down every station, every jurisdiction. No.
Yeah, I think if you're in LA, we're on KTI. In New York, we're on WFAS. But we are in a lot of places. Very fortunate, very blessed, and you can always check it out on Apple Podcasts. It's probably the easiest place. If you miss it at night, check it the next day. Rich Valdes, America at Night.
Very good. And we're going to have links up at the P.A.S. report to it. So, Rich, always a pleasure speaking with you, and thanks for coming on the program.
Yes, sir. See you at CPAC, my brother.
Rich is a great guy. Everyone should check out America at Night. I have the links up to the show. And to follow Rich, go to the P.A.S. report website, PASreport.com. I'm working on a great episode for Wednesday. Be sure to tune in. As always, please share this episode with family and friends and on social media. If you find the podcast informative, please give the P.A.S. report a 5-star rating, write a review on any podcast platform that allows it. I want to thank you for joining me, and I'll be back on Wednesday with another great episode of the P.A.S. Report podcast.
Thank you for listening to the P.A.S. Report Weekly Roundup Podcast.
Have a good one. Bye.
Be sure to rate, share, and subscribe to the podcast so you'll never miss an episode. Also, visit PASreport.com and follow us on Twitter at PAS Report.